guys, welcome to another video tutorial with me, Claire's. In this video, we are doing something right on time for Love Day or Valentine's Day coming up. Let's really quickly talk about the supplies and then we can move on. Our supplies for today are pretty much going to be the sponsors for the Tuscany watercolor retreat that's coming up in May. So we've got My Mary set of the Daler-Rowney colors because there's some beautiful jewel tones in here, which I think would go great with our subject, which I'm going to get to in a moment. And then we are using some metallics by KMS. And last but not least, we are using our Princeton brushes in the Princeton Neptune number 6, Princeton Velvetouch number 4, and Princeton Heritage 04 details. So for today, we are going to be painting this diamond shaped or heart shaped diamond. Got a little bit confused there. I've sketched it out. I have the drawing available. So look in the description below and you should find a link for this. Download it and let's get started. If you're new to my channel or new to watercolor in general, guys, I encourage you to hit that like button and hit the subscribe button, as you're going to come across a ton of videos which will allow you to grow in watercolor and also have fun doing it. Now, the first thing we're going to do is start mixing our colors. I am assuming you guys have gone ahead and traced out the drawing and the base drawing rather, and you're ready to go. We are going to tackle it in such a way where the center is the lightest and we are highlighting certain sections around on the edges with darker colors of the red. And this way we get a little bit of depth happening from this side. Mainly on this side, we'll have a couple of darker sections over here, but that's the whole idea. So let's just go with the flow. We're going to be using the number 6 to do our light wash, and then the number 4, which is my absolute favorite, to take a little bit of a darker color and drop that in so we get those beautiful blooms, because that's what's going to give us a pretty effect with our heart. At least we're using the number 0 for our champagne. I'm going to be using champagne. Feel free to use another metallic if you wish. And we're going to be painting this in. So I've just done a very light base painting of just 1/2, and I've used my quinacridone red, and now we're mixing using the number 4. We're mixing a darker version of it by taking a little bit of Payne's gray and dropping that in. And what we're going to do is drop that in. So the longer you wait for things to dry, the easier it gets, so that when you add color, it doesn't bloom all over the place. And that's what we need to do, because we need the separations to be pretty in your face. So I'm taking some of my color and I'm going to drop that in first over here in this section here. And as soon as you see it kind of blending into areas you don't want it to blend in, you can just take your number 1, because a lot of these areas are still pretty damp. So you take your number 1 and you can lift your color off. And this sort of stops it from blending into the other areas. You catch this earlier on in your painting, you're able to control how far things go. Now, another way to do this is make sure that your brush that you're adding color with doesn't have too much water on it. So you need more color, less water, and then you'll get more of a stronger blend as opposed to like a flowy blend. So I'm getting some of this mixed up in here. I'm going to mix a little bit of that second tone that we have happening, and that is the permanent red light. And I'm going to drop that in over here. And again, like I mentioned, we want this to flow nicely, blend in nicely while we're experiencing watercolor, but it's also giving us different hues and variations of our to our heart. I'm going to drop some of that next color on here. I'm going to drop a little bit over here. And as you can see, most of it has dried up. It's giving me a nice blend. This is wet on wet, but it's giving me more of a solid blend. if that makes any sense. Like it's not flowing all over the place. I don't think solid is the right word, but you guys understand what I'm trying to say. It's not blooming all over. I'm going to take some of the darker tone, and our plan was to have more of the darker variation of red happening at the base, and so that's what's happening here. I'm just dropping it at the edge and it's blooming into our heart. I'll do a little bit over here at this area, and notice I'm using my brush to direct where the color is going. So I don't want it going over to my left, so I'm kind of moving all the color down here, and so it's kind of going to remain there. Now, watercolor also dries differently. So as you can notice over here at the top, we've got some stuff bleeding over. Now you can choose to leave it as is because we're sort of trying to keep things light and loose and fun, and allow this to be a natural part of your painting, because once we go in with our metallics, it's going to give us more definition. Or you can go in and sort of move things around like I just did. Entirely up to you. So I'm going to get a little bit more color now at this point and continue on with the rest of these areas. So these areas at the top, I'm using more of the actual color itself, a darker tone. And this way it doesn't look light, because our midsection should be as light as this. And you're going to notice that watercolor dries up a lot lighter than it actually is. This is why when we drop in color in certain areas, the reason we're doing that is because we want them to stand out a tad bit more. Okay. So now we're going to mimic what we did here, allowing this to dry a bit. We're going to mimic this over on this side. And I'm going to take a little bit of that second tone, which is more of an orangey color, mix it in with some of the mixes that I have, and again, dampen this whole area. Taking water and using that to pull it down over the rest of my heart. I'm going to get a little bit of that darker color and add that to the base here and allow it to seep into the top area as well. Just on the edges, mainly on the edges, I should say. Okay, now once we have this, we're going to do exactly what we did over here. We're taking variations of our darker tones and we are mixing it in. So I'm not really paying too much attention over what color or how dark certain how dark the mix is. I'm just going to get the mix that I have because we want different variations. That's the whole point. And I'm going to start, because I know this is darker, I'm starting at the bottom here and just sort of lightly bringing it forward. I'm going to start that over here as well. You can alternate, this way you know you're not going to have the same blend happening throughout. I'm going to add some at the bottom here. I'm going to wash off most of this color and get mainly the plain orange and drop that in here. Let's get a little bit happening on this side. Notice how I am painting just the one area and the color is automatically seeping in. This is a great exercise because it shows you how watercolor moves, and it kind of does the work for you almost. I know we said darker colors only at the bottom, but I'm doing this area here because I know it's going to seep in. And then last but not least, on this side, I get a little bit of this pinky quinacridone and drop that in there. I want to do a little bit of the lighter tones, so I've just taken a little bit of the quin and I'm dropping that in between the darker areas that we've painted. This way we're getting some breakup in our patterns and we can see exactly where that is. Now that this area is dried up a ton more, we can go in and do this over here as well. We have a little bit more control because it's dried up considerably. So it's not going all over the place. And now we can darken our bottom areas even more by just going over with another layer. I'm going to do a little bit at the top here. And then we're doing the other side as well. Just a couple of areas just to sort of make those bits stand out some more. I know I don't have this piece, but I'm just going to do a tiny little section off here just so I have a little bit more interest visually with the darks and the lights, and you can do that as well. And we are almost done this part. And now once this is dried up, we can go ahead and add our light center. So finish fluffing around, make sure it's dried up nicely before we do our center, and then you can hit play again to this video. In the meantime, hit pause, take your time going about doing things, create more if you want to, and then let's get back to the center. Okay, so we're back and I have painted to my heart's content, and now we are ready to tackle the center. So I'm going to use the number 6 because it's a great brush to just dampen the area, but you can also get a lighter version of the color just like we did with each half of the heart, the base coat, and then we went in and we added more details. I added a lot more darker details. I kind of just went with the flow, and that happens at times. Embrace it. Okay, so here we go. I'm just dabbing in some color using some nice loose strokes. And this is going to be the nice reflective center that we have for our heart diamond. So spread it around. Enjoy this process of really focusing and honing in as you pay very careful attention to not touch the edges and go over your line too much. Even in loose watercolor, there is something known as intentionally not touching things, or just being a little bit more detailed as opposed to loose in every single thing that you do. Would also be nice to get a little bit of touch happening here, so some color seeps in. That would be a nice pretty effect. Not quite realistic, but we're not going for realistic. We're going for fun and pretty and loose. Okay, so we've got our base for the heart. Get a little bit more of color, more of the color, and just sort of dab that in. I'm dabbing it in some of the corners here because I want to make it seem like it's bleeding in from the corners, just like I had mentioned. Slightly different variation happening here. Feel free to mix the colors and really have fun with watching it blend. Okay, now that I've done that, we're gonna go in and get a slightly darker version of this. We're gonna just sort of drop it in, maybe more like diagonally, and then leave some of the areas that are lighter, just so it looks like a reflection, and you're good. Okay, and that is it, guys. So now we need to allow this to dry before we can go in with our number 0 and then a little bit of metallics and really outline the separations within our heart diamond. But while that is happening, I want to put in another thing that we can do, which is adding a little bit of shadow just to the base of our heart. So all I'm doing is I've taken my number 4 and I have created a water sort of outline right along the edge here. And I'm dampening that whole area. Can see a little bit of bleed happening, and then we're going to take a little bit of our Payne's gray and we're dropping that in at the edge here. And it's lifting. Oops, I got a little bit of red in there. And just allow this to smudge over. So everything's pretty much dried up and we are ready to do our final step to this, and that is adding some of our metallic paints on here. So I'm just kind of activating this so I have a good enough amount, a nice thick consistency, because we don't want it to be translucent. So I added a bunch of water in there and I'm mixing it up. And using my number 0, we are ready to begin. So this takes a little bit of brush control, so make sure if you're not quite, this isn't your plus point, just take a sheet of paper and lightly start grazing so you get a little bit of practice before you start. So I'm just dabbing to make sure everything is good. And we're gonna start off in the driest area and I'm just lightly grazing. I'm not quite decided if I want to do the edges, so I'm not doing them. I just did like a light, super light line. Ooh, this looks pretty, guys. A lot of triangles. And just light grazing all around. And that's pretty much the whole idea. So pause this video. I am going to take my time to do this. Maybe turn on a song if you've not lit a candle already, light that candle and just get swept away in this action or motion or activity, whatever you want to call it. And then come back when you're done, and I should have my finished results to present to you. All right, we're back, and this is what the finished product looks like. I didn't end up outlining everywhere, just in certain areas. Feel free to do what you feel you would like to see in your work. Lastly, I want to mention and remind y'all, if you're new to my channel or new to watercolor and you are still looking to grow and have some fun doing it, hit that like button, hit the subscribe button, and you are not going to be disappointed.